Hey, it's Brad, and welcome to the Banger Hanger for another episode of Overkill Reviews. You know, it's our weekly metal review show. We're here every week. Hopefully you're here every week, because that makes our views go whoop. Anyway, I don't really have that much exciting stuff going on. I'm just working, hanging out, but I like my job. Actually, I went to Buffalo to see Ice Nine Kills and Motionless in White with my friend Lindsay, Schoolcraft, and that was very cool. But other than that, just chilling, man. Follow me on the social medias to keep up with my not exciting life, although I think it's thrilling. Also, follow us on Twitch because we're doing a Lockhorns thing over there. For some reason, I always think this band is from like the Pacific Northwest. I don't know where that came from. They're not even the same coast. They're from Rochester, New York. Anyway, it's time. To rise from the grave. Like how I made the ellipses, carry their weight there. That's right, it's the new album from Undeath called It's Time, ... to Rise from the Grave, out today on Prosthetic Records. So Undeath formed in 2018 in, again, Rochester, New York, not the Pacific Northwest. Don't get it twisted like my dumbass. Anyway, they formed as a trio featuring vocalist Alex Jones, not that one, guitarist Kyle Beam, and drummer Matt Browning. They would drop 2 demos, one, their debut, and then another one that was a kind of a demo, kind of an EP called Sentient Autolysis. It kind of exists in that purgatory. Is it a demo? Is it a proper EP? But they also unveiled their now infamous logo. So a while later, debut LP Lesions of a Different Kind dropped mid-pandemic, October 23rd, 2020 to be exact, to massive critical and fan acclaim. With any hopes of touring dashed, back to the studio they went. They've been sitting on this album for like around a year, and in the interim, they hopped on this huge tour with Black Dahlia Murder, After the Burial, Carnifex, and Rivers of Nile, so it's time for it to come out. They call themselves skull-crushing death metal, so I guess we'll see if my head looks the same by the end of this review. Although I'm wearing a hat, so you probably wouldn't see where it was crushed, so. Earlier we played a clip from a video, and that's like the sorta pseudo title track. It includes part of the title, but not the whole thing. And it has some serious Heartwork era Carcass vibes with that lead especially, and some serious gallops that play throughout and especially below the solo. But the album kicks off with a little bass solo, bass fill, whatever you want to call it, harkening back to some Cannibal Corpse shit. Indeed, that's much of what's going on this album. To say there are a litany of Cannibal Corpse isms would be a bit of a misnomer. Rather, Undeath have built their sound on top of that foundation. So it's constantly stabbing through in different angles and different places. To show both the Cannibal Corpse foundation and what they've built on top of it, I'm going to delve into 2 companion tracks on the album that illustrate the full picture. Well, that part of the picture. First up, we have Enhancing the Dead, a song about basically turning a human into a cyborg. The human was suffering from a condition called death, and now they are living in Undeath. The opening hammer-on and pull-off part sounds just like classic Cannibal Corpse. And if you're thinking it also sounds like classic death metal, that's because Cannibal Corpse really helped write the book on that. There's this trem-picking part that separates that riff from another riff I'm about to talk about, And that's really necessary on all death metal releases. Throughout the album, there are similar, trem-led riffs that bring to mind Demigod, Malevolent Creation, and more greats of the genre. Anyway, after that, remember I told you that riff was like a bridge from the hammer-on and pull-off Cannibal Corpse to this? We get to a part that is like simultaneously tight and loose, and that wasn't a joke. The way the drums at times feel slightly offbeat and just out of line reminds me of the early days of Cannibal Corpse and death metal, where riffs could switch on a dime and the rules weren't yet carved into stone. I guess another reference here and at similar points throughout the album could be like Testimony of the Ancients by Pestilence, when they went like slightly more progressive. They're still old school death metal, but slightly more progressive. On the other hand, we have a song like Defiled Again, which is sludgier in a way that would make your Autopsy or your Morbid Angels proud. Somewhere in the middle of those, both sonically and chronologically by track order, is a part so fun that it barely makes you think at all. This song gets into the nitty-gritty of making those undead cyborgs. Remember I told you it was a companion piece. So I don't know if this is gonna be a popular comparison or one that anybody's expecting, but this song, and in particular this clip that I chose, reminds me of Death Clock, especially with like the vocal patterns in the chorus. The Death Clock song that immediately comes to mind is Face Fisted, though it's not an exact match. I guess it's just kind of in like the Neanderthal-esque like delivery. And having the DNA of a band like Death Clock is a great sign for these lads, because each consecutive Death album was the highest charting death metal album of all time, as they would rise through the ranks on the Billboard 200 from 21 to 15 to 10. I mean, Undeath don't have this massive media push behind them, like a TV show on a celebrated comedy network like Adult Swim. Is that a network or a producer? I don't know. Doesn't matter. I'm not in TV. It's just the music here. But the band ultimately are a little cartoony, literally, if you look at their illustration in the April issue of Decibel. But seriously, their lyrics are anything but serious. They really lean into the horror and the gore for like a blood-soaked good time. Defiled Again, I talked about that earlier. It references the Book of the Damned, not that far off from Evil Dead's Necronomicon, aka Book of the Dead. That movie is so self-aware and like cartoony that it elicits as many laughs as screams. The title track that played earlier, well, that's about Undeath. Zombies are well represented here, much more well represented than they are in the real world, where I don't think they exist yet. Head Splattered in 7 Ways is hilarious in its specificity. Not 1, not 10, 7. Maybe it's like because it's like the most common number you roll with dice. It's like the most common combination. Or maybe it's because when you're at the casino, they do the thing with the 7s. I don't know, but it makes me laugh. Anyway, this is the kind of violence that you can't really get offended by. It's not targeting any one person. It just kind of exists as this splattery good time. Anyway, a slightly more visceral image is formed by my favorite song on the album, Human Chandelier. definitely one of the tracks that veers more toward brutal death metal, bringing to mind the band's like other New York State forebears, Suffocation. And I didn't even play the breakdown slam part yet, so you got that to look forward to when you press play. But this song also has this riff in the middle that's as melodic as the album really gets. It's somewhere between the melancholy of At the Gates and the triumph of power metal. The album also closes with a really brutal song called Trampled Headstones, and then there's a breakdown in Funeral Within that hits similarly hard, and funnily enough, also recalls the band who wrote the similarly titled Funeral Inception. Yep, I'm talking about Suffocation once again. All of this makes me wonder what it would sound like if the production was a bit beefier here. I'm not huge on some of the sonic choices here. Unfortunately, the sound of their debut LP, Lesions, is one of the things that stopped me from truly loving this band when seemingly all of my peers really did. I wish that I could have seen them live in that time period because I think that that very well could have won me over. Alas, the production here is a bit more trebly than I would like in places, but is overall an improvement on the previous album. And the more you listen to it, the more, you get comfortable with it. You're in this world and it doesn't bother you as much as it may or may not bother you on first listen. I mean, I'm sure it's probably not going to be much of a deterrent to people because a lot of people really liked the last album. And indeed, the songs are good. I just had to note this here. I guess my other main problem is that I find the song Bone Rot has the opposite problem of a sandwich where the good stuff in this case is on the outside. So I guess it's kind of like Double Down from KFC where they make the chicken buns, but with the bacon on the inside, but it's never enough bacon really. It's just like, why? Like you need to quadruple the bacon there. So it's like there's good on the inside, but not enough. But the good stuff is definitely on the outside. I'm vegan. I don't know why I'm talking about this. Anyway, that's not to say it's a bad song at all. I just really love Human Chandelier and Trampled Headstones. So often when I finish Human Chandelier, I want to listen to Trampled Headstones. So the song doesn't get its due. All right, so Undeath have talked a lot about how they want death metal to be fun. Fuck a meandering symphonic intro on their album. They hate when people call shows like their concerts live rituals, which I hugely agree with. That's some dork shit. And generally when people misrepresent themselves, try to be something they're not, these guys, I read an interview, it might have been one that came out today in Spin, I don't remember, but I read an interview where they just said, we're just overweight stoned gamers or something. And they have songs that reference, Quake and Doom in these games. So, true. Plus, they also beefed Chris Barnes, so respect. I reviewed Exodus's Blood In, Blood Out for Exclaim and pointed out how they seem to embrace, the B-movie campy side of thrash metal. And death metal came from thrash metal. There are bands that straddle the line. And Undeath also see, camp and B-movie slasher appeal in death metal and really embrace it, lean into it. There have been plenty of other bands, over the past 5-10 years, aping the likes of Obituary and Bolt Thrower. And then there's a whole litany of bands that are just Immolation, Incantation clones. And it's truly mind-boggling that no one has really tried to capture the spirit of Cannibal Corpse, the most successful death metal band of all time, arguably. I don't even know if it's arguable anymore. I think it's just fact, but you can argue in the comments, I guess. Anyway, for all of these reasons, this album is a simultaneously retro and fresh take on the genre being done for the right reasons, in the right ways, with a sense of awareness. I gotta give this album 4 out of 5 skulls. And if the production was a little beefier, might have gotten the bump up, but again, I listen to deathcore that sounds like it was made on a computer, so take my shit with a grain of salt. Take all reviews with a grain of salt. It's just my opinion, bro. All right, shout out. Cool. Up first, we've got an album that came out April 8th. It's ABYSMALIST and their album Vile Possession on Maggot Stomp. This band has Fred from Unurnment and is more of a old school leaning death metal band, you know, a little bit old school death metal, a little bit death doom. It's really good. I'm kind of biased because I wrote the bio for it and I think Fred's really talented, but you should definitely check it out. Up next on April 10th came out the album Flourishing, Extremities on Unspoiled, Mental Grounds by PHARMACIST on Bizarre Leprous production and Sevared Records. I had to give Sevared a shout out there. They were, you know, represented on my Indonesian brutal death metal episode of Overkill Global. But this band is kind of like a, you know, some carcass worship, some gore grind. They got Andrew Lee in here, also of Ripped to Shreds, pulling some crazy leads out, and it, you know, continues to expand their sound that is really fun and just a great listen. And I'm excited to hear where they go from here. They release a lot of music, so there will probably be more soon. Anyway, up next, April 15th, ANALEPSY released their album Quescence, I don't know how to say that word, on Agonia Records. These guys are like, you know, the slammy, brutal death metal band, but I remember when their last album came out, they kind of transcended that, and a lot of people who normally weren't into that were like, this is the band of this style. Let's see if they can continue down that path and really appeal to those people. The jury is still out. My last shout out comes out today, April 22nd. The band is called Sentient Horror. The album is called Rites of Gore, and it comes out on Redefining Darkness. These guys are, you know, old school death metal, a little bit on the Swedish side of things, but they tread the line. You know, they got some Swedish, they got some American. It's just really solid death metal. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I've said death metal a lot because this is all death metal, so I'm sure we'll talk about death metal in the comments. Bye-bye.